Welcome to Dead Time, a bonus part of the Dead podcast, where I will read stories or encounters that spill over from my previous episode. Today, I will be reading Encounters with the Devil. I hope y'all enjoy. Always watch out on the night of January 5th, since the devil may be waiting to take your soul. The night of January 5th is known as the 12th night because it is the night of the 12th day of Christmas. In olden times, the 12th night was a night of drinking, feasting, gambling, and all around troublemaking. It was a time when people thought the normal rules didn't apply. Because of this, it is said that long ago, God told Satan that each year on the 12th night he could take the soul of one person whom he caught engaging in debauchery in each and every town across the world. Today, the 12th night is a more or less forgotten holiday, if you've even heard the phrase 12th night at all. It's probably been in the context of the famous comedy by William Shakespeare, Twelfth Night, or What You Will. Chances are you've never heard the stories about how, in the olden days, people would mysteriously go missing after a long night of drinking and merrymaking. Despite all of this, some say that even today, people still go missing on the 12th night. The only difference is that back in the old days, towns were small enough that everyone knew everyone. So everyone noticed when someone went missing. Nowadays, towns are so large that few people even notice when a person is suddenly gone from the earth. Well, as it happens, I know that the stories about the 12th night are true because I have personally seen the devil going about his rounds collecting souls on the night of January 5th. It all happened a few years ago. My wife of 30 years had died suddenly, only a month prior. We never had any children, so my only living relative was my sister, who, at the time, was living half a world away with her husband and her 2 kids in New Zealand. Consequently, I was feeling very alone, and I was going through a really painful phase of depression. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't sleep. It was a clear night, though, so I put my coat on over my pajamas and went out onto the back porch to look at the stars. There was no snow, but there was a wintry chill in the air. I didn't mind. The cold felt right for some reason. I felt like I deserved to be cold, like I deserved to suffer. I don't know why I felt that way, since I knew my wife's death wasn't my fault. I suppose that grief and guilt are such similar feelings that it's hard to feel one without the other. My house is on the edge of a cornfield in the middle of nowhere, and there are no neighbors, so the winter air was dead silent. The silence reminded me of how alone I was. I desperately longed for someone to talk to, someone other than the dreadful, nagging voice in my head telling me how empty my life was. I don't know how long I was standing there, leaning against the railing, thinking about how miserable I was before he showed up. You know who I'm talking about. I didn't know it was him when I saw him. From afar, he looked just like a businessman, dressed in his finest suit. I didn't know what he was doing there in the middle of the empty cornfield, or how he'd gotten there, but I could tell he was walking towards me. I debated what to do. For a moment, I thought about going inside, but I decided to stay outside and wait for him. I figured there was nothing he could take from me that I cared about that I hadn't already lost, and if he killed me, it would be for the better. I stayed still as he crossed from the empty cornfield into my yard. He didn't stop there. He came all the way to the porch and walked up the few short steps to stand behind me. It was there that he stopped. I didn't turn around to look at him. "Sir, you look troubled," he said. His words sounded as though they were meant to be comforting, but his voice was as cold as the air. "Is there anyone who isn't troubled?" I asked him glumly. "You know what night this is," he told me. "This isn't a night to be troubled on." "Well, I don't care," I grumbled. "My grief doesn't go away on Epiphany Eve just because it's a holiday." "You know who I am too, don't you?" he asked, although his voice made it clear he wasn't really asking a question. "I think I do," I told him. "Is there a reason you've come to trouble me?" "Look at me," he commanded. Almost involuntarily, I turned around to face him. His face looked human enough, but it was the wrong kind of human. His image was the worst of humanity, a reflection of all our wickedness and despair. I tried to look away, but I found I could not. Something in me forced me to keep looking at him, even though I could hardly bear the sight of him. "Have you come to take my soul?" I asked him. "No," he replied. "Not tonight, at least." "Then why have you come?" I asked. "Because I have just taken someone else's soul that I think you might care to know about." A wave of fear washed over me. For a moment, I thought he was referring to my sister in New Zealand. "Not her," he said. "Someone else." "Who?" "A disloyal cockroach who picked the wrong night to spend with his mistress." With that, he disappeared. There was no puff of smoke, no flash of fire, no evil cackle. One moment he was there, the next he wasn't. I stood there for a moment, confused, frightened, and dumbfounded. Then I went back inside, wondering if he'd really been there at all. For a moment, I managed to convince myself that I'd just imagined the whole thing, that it was just a hallucination resulting from sleep deprivation and depression. The next morning, something happened that removed all doubt from my mind about what I had seen. My sister called me, her voice filled with panic. She told me that her husband had gone missing and that she had no idea where he was. The search for her husband went on for months, but they never found even the slightest clue where he'd gone. It was as though he'd vanished off the face of the earth. Eventually, by late September, my sister called to tell me that she was moving back home and bringing her kids with her. It was the first good news I'd heard in over a year. She moved back soon enough for us to have Christmas together, for the first time in years. Now, I no longer feel alone. But I feel horrible inside, because even though it was the devil's doing, I still feel like what happened is somehow my fault. In any case, I still haven't told my sister about what the devil told me on that cold night of January 5th. I didn't want to hurt her by telling her the truth about her husband. If you are going to sin, take care that you don't do it on the 12th night, or else the devil may just do to you what he did to my sister's husband. My name is Brent. What I am about to tell you is true. I do not care if you believe me. I am posting this to hopefully save someone's soul. Do not ever make a deal with the devil, no matter how small. This is my story. Growing up, I had semi-religious parents. Going to church on Sunday was about as far as they went. When I was younger, I believed in God. But as I got older, that changed. I always thought people at church were so fucking judgmental. Like if you didn't have at least a $150 suit on, well, you can burn in hell. Around the age of 21, I had completely stopped believing in God, Satan, ghosts, the boogeyman, etc. I was hanging out with a group of friends, one of which was my best friend, Stephen. Stephen was pretty damn religious. He went to church and never said goddamn. He always wore a cross necklace and prayed before eating. The only vice he really had was he liked to smoke a little weed and maybe drink, neither of which I believe is a sin, but what the fuck do I know? Stephen, my other friends, and I were chilling out one day. The topic of religion was brought up. I uncomfortably sat there and thought about how the idea of heaven, hell, and everything in between was so fucking ludicrous. I wish I would have been right. Stephen asked me what I thought, and, unfortunately, I told him the truth. None of this shit is real, Stephen, I hissed. God, if you are real, strike me down now. Nothing happened. It doesn't work like that, Brent, Stephen insisted. But, please stop. I don't want anything to happen to you. Sometimes, the devil will answer if you call against God. Now this is where I made the biggest mistake of my life, which probably won't be too much longer. Nah, fuck that. Neither exist, I said. Hey devil, I sell you my soul for a nickel. Everybody looked at me like I was fucking crazy. But still nothing happened. Yet. 2 weeks or so passed, and I got a call from Stephen. Hey bro, you want to go to church with me? They are having an open house, so there will be a lot of people there who are way less judgmental. For about 30 solid fucking minutes, I protested. But Stephen knew the way to my heart. Alright dude, if you come with me tonight, drinks are on me. Fucking Stephen, he had me at drinks. Stephen picked me up, and we arrived to a fucking packed church parking lot. As soon as I walked in, I felt sick to my stomach. Literally sick. I sucked it up, thinking about the drinks, and meeting a girl would be the ever-needed cherry on top. Everyone in church exchanged pleasantries and sat down. At first, nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The preacher started his sermon, and I sat there, bored as fuck. But I kept feeling worse. I felt dizzy now, had a huge headache, and started to sweat profusely. trying to breathe slow and make it through whatever was happening to me. The preacher started to get loud. There are things in this church that are not welcome. You have tainted this church with evil. You need to come up and ask for forgiveness or leave. At this point, I'm still not convinced, but oddly, I was about to pass out. Stephen took notice and recommended we went in the hallway and get some air. When we got in the hallway, Stephen looked concerned. Are you okay? Let's go up front and get you saved, Brent. It won't hurt. Rage immediately flew over me, and I have no idea why. Fuck you, Stephen. How the fuck would that guy know anything about me? I just don't feel good. I probably ate something. Don't fucking judge me like everyone else. Stephen, being the nice guy he is, agreed and offered to buy me a drink from the $1 vending machine. He put $1 in, pressed Mountain Dew, but nothing happened. He pressed it repeatedly. Still nothing. Of course, I said. The perfect little church wants to rip us off. I punched the machine as hard as I could. Still no drink. But something fell into the change dispenser. It was a fucking nickel. Stephen stood there in awe, begging me to go beg for forgiveness and get saved. I should have. God damn, I was so stupid. I stormed out of the church, telling myself it was a coincidence. I don't remember whether or not I truly believed that or not. But I do remember it got much, much worse. I was in Stephen's car waiting. He walked up to the car when service was over. You okay? He asked. Yeah, man, I feel better now. You can take me back home. Nah, bro, you need a drink, he said, and I was glad he did. We went to a little bar called Rigsby's. What it meant, I have no fucking idea, but there were always girls in a live band there. I started drinking pretty heavy to try to forget about the day. A man came up and ordered a Red Devil. Good choice, the bartender said. That'll be $6. The man paid, but he said something that caught me a little off guard. Here you go, $6. Oh, and take this. He gave the bartender a nickel for a tip, winked at me, and got up to leave. What about your drink? The bartender asked. The man turned to me and said, Let Brent have it. Now this is where I started to freak. Who the fuck was this guy, and how did he know my name? I turned to Stephen to see his reaction. He was talking to a pretty brunette. He hadn't seen anything. I got up, hoping to find the man outside, but he was gone. I shot a text to Stephen, telling him I was tired and needed to get some sleep. I'll get a cab, I told him. The ride home wasn't relaxing either. The cab driver was probably Dominican, judging from his accent. I noticed he kept looking back at me in his rear view and lit up an incense. He kept staring at me and mumbling something that sounded like Ave Maria Grati Plen. I have never been able to figure out what that meant, because I probably spelt it wrong. Is something wrong? I asked. Don't hurt me, he said. Nah, man, no worries. I just need a ride. Why would I hurt you? Do I know you, or do you know me? What's up with that? I asked. Just don't hurt me. When we arrived to my apartment, he would not take a cent. He wouldn't look at me or roll down his window. He just took the fuck off. Now, I tried to brush things off my back all day, but I pretty much knew I was fucked at this point. I went straight to bed, didn't even take my shoes off, and surprisingly passed out immediately. I woke the next morning to Stephen's text. asking me if I had made it home safe and bragging about taking the brunette home. I told him, "Fuck you, and yes I did, thanks for asking." I was off that day, so I just slept. I woke up around 7 p.m. I was fucking terrified as soon as I opened my eyes. The man from the bar was sitting at the edge of my bed, staring right at me. "Sleep good?" "Get out. Who are you? What do you want?" I screamed. "Oh, Brent, I have everything I want. I just wanted to give this to you. You haven't taken it yet." He extended his hand. There it was, a fucking nickel. The man at the end of my bed, showing me the nickel, was beautiful. I've loved women all my life and have never seen anything like this dude. He seemed flawless. His cheekbones seemed to have muscles on top of muscles. His jawline was like a Greek statue of a god. Yet, something was in his eyes. Actually, something was missing from his eyes. It's hard to explain. It was like they were lifeless. They weren't dark or miscolored. They just looked like they belonged to somebody who was right at death's door. In short, there was no twinkle or hope, just dull nothingness. His attire was something you would see celebrities wear at the Grammys. His cufflinks shined even in my darkened room. He had a smile on his face with a relaxed posture, but at the same time scared me to my core. He had a look in those dull eyes like he was the lion and I was the gazelle. "Take the nickel, Brent. After all, it is yours." He spoke confidently and stern. I didn't know what to say. All I knew is I didn't want this anymore, and wasn't going to take it from him. As I was about to say no, he stood up, laid the nickel on my dresser, and started to walk out. Right before he walked out of my front door, I heard, "Brent, if you don't take it, well, that would be very unfortunate. Not just for you." Every fiber in my body wanted to get up and sprint to him and demand answers. Sadly, though, I acted as a coward, staying in my bed until I was sure he was gone. For a while that night, I searched the web trying to find anything to help me, all to no avail. I finally called Stephen, asking him to come over, knowing he may be able to help. I dialed his number, and he answered. "Yo, bro, you a damn psychic? I'm heading over there now, and you have to hear about last night." His phone cut off. I waited for him to call me back. Nothing. I tried to call him back. Nothing. He must be close and is just ignoring me. I waited and waited. Then I got a chill as I heard sirens wailing in the distance. As soon as I heard them, I got a call. It was Stephen's mom, Pam. She was basically my second mom. She would pick us up from school every day when we were younger and take us to the movies, the park, and whatever else we wanted. As soon as I answered, I knew something was wrong. She was sobbing uncontrollably. I already knew. "Where and how, Pam?" My voice was already cracking, and I felt tears pull up. "Car crash, Brent. They are trying to pry the doors off now." "He was coming to see you?" "He was about 1 mile away from your apartment." I could barely understand her between her sobs, the sirens, and the commotion. "I'm on my way, Pam." I hung up, staring at the phone in disbelief. I frantically threw some clothes on, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. As soon as my hand was on the door, it flew open. "What's up, bro?" It was Stephen. "Stephen, you're alive." I sputtered, yeah, bro, what's up with you? Why are you crying? He snickered. I looked down at my call log, and there was no call from Pam, just one to Stephen. I thought you were... Did you see any cops or ambulances? I asked, wondering what was going on, all the while wondering how my padded room would feel because I thought I had went mental. Oh yeah, just one ambulance, he said. They blew past me, but that was about it. What's wrong, Brent? Need to talk? I was already getting ready to tell him about the hell spawn that had been in my room, so I didn't want to tell him about the crash. Fearing he may admit me to a ward himself. Stephen, I know this is going to sound crazy. Just please don't think I am crazy. Just listen. I told him everything, including the night before with the man at the bar and also the cab driver. At first, I thought he didn't believe me, as he was staring at me in shock. He sat there, not saying a word. For a while, looked up at me and said, Brent, we need to get you saved. They are still having homecoming at my church. They can help you. For the first time in my life, I thought going to church could help. I was wrong. We loaded and headed out. On the way, he was explaining how much fun he had with the girl and was about to give me the details of his night when a truck veered over into our lane. Stephen swerved to try to get out of the way, and we went into a ditch, flew back out of it, and rolled what it felt like 50 times before I blacked out. When I woke up, all I saw were lights, and I was in some serious pain. The nurses, doctors, and my mom and dad were standing over me. Oh, thank God, Brent. Can you hear me? It's Mom. Your dad and I are right here with you, son. I was relieved for only about 10 seconds. When I took notice of the doctor standing over me, taking his surgical mask off. It was the man who had been to my house and the bar. He grinned at me, and I started wailing, damn near pulling my IV out in the process. Before I could even attempt to tell anyone who he was, I started to fade to black again. I had a dream. I was at church with Stephen, and everyone was staring forward at the preacher, who was turning around, staring at one of those fucked up paintings of Jesus bleeding on the cross. All at once, everyone turned to me and stared, except the preacher. I was terrified and wanted to run, but couldn't. Every single fucking one of them turned their head almost completely sideways and opened their mouth. No smiling, but just a completely huge and unnatural open mouth. In my dream, I closed my eyes to pray. As soon as I did, everyone, all at once, started to whisper something. I opened my eyes, and the fucking preacher was moving towards me. Fast. Not walking, just floating towards me at a literally ungodly pace. I turned to Stephen, hoping he would help me. As soon as I saw him, his face twisted, and everyone in the same roaring and evil voice said, God can't help you now. Then I woke up. This time to just my mom in the corner. I must have woken up screaming. She ran up to me in a panic and told me I was okay. She told me I had a broken collarbone, 2 broke ribs, and had shattered almost every bone in my right hand. She started to tear up. What's wrong, Mom? I was sobbing at this point. I'm alive and here. Tears started to roll from her, And she replied with, "Stephen is dead, honey. They had to pry him out, and he was bent in half. I'm so sorry, honey. So sorry." I started to tremble. What the fuck? Guilt poured over me. I should have known. My father walked in, happy to see me awake. "Hey, son, I'm so happy you're awake, and I am sorry about Stephen. His mom is here. She wants to talk to you soon. She said she wanted to ask you something. The doctor said the only permanent damage that you will have will be in your hand. He seems very nice, Brent. He was very concerned about you." "Don't let him come near me, Dad. Please, please. He is a bad man. Please, Dad," I pleaded. "Son, you don't even know him, and you're on heavy meds. Try to get some rest. We aren't going anywhere." How could I blame him for thinking that? Stephen's mom, Pam, walked in, asking my mom and dad for a second alone with me. She walked up to me, clearly devastated. "I'm so sorry, Pam. I didn't have the heart to tell her all this was my fault." "It's not your fault, baby. I have a question, though," she whimpered. "Was Stephen on any drugs?" "No, Pam, absolutely not," I declared. "Why?" She had a strange look in her eyes. "Because when they pulled him from the wreckage, his mouth and throat were filled with nickels." "Why the hell was he doing that? Do you know anything about that, Brent?" My heart skipped a beat. Again, like a coward, I faked a puzzled look and told her no. She gave me a hug and walked back outside. Before the door could close behind her, he walked in. The man, demon, devil, or whatever he was. He walked in. He walked up right into my ear and whispered, "God can't help you now." That brings me to the end of Dead Time. Thanks for listening to the Dead Podcast. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the Dead Podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at thedeadpodcast1@gmail.com, or send me a DM on Instagram. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and be sure to come back next week for my next episode.